It was 1985, and I remember the night vividly. My parents had just left to visit my aunt, my mom's sister, who had an urgent need for help. She had suffered some kind of domestic accident, and they wanted to see how she was doing. Normally, I wouldn't be left alone, but they assured me it would be a quick visit. They'd be back in a few hours. As they closed the door behind them, a strange feeling washed over me, a mix of unease and dread. The house was unusually quiet. I tried to distract myself with some TV, but the static on the screen only added to my growing anxiety. The rain outside began to pour heavily, thunder rumbling in the distance, and a thick fog started to creep down our deserted street. I could feel the air grow colder. The once cozy home now felt eerie and uninviting. I thought about calling my parents, but I didn't want to seem scared. Besides, they'd be back soon, right? As the minutes dragged on, the lights began to flicker. At first, it was just a slight dimming, but soon they were flashing on and off violently, plunging the room into darkness before bathing it in harsh, bright light again. Each flicker made my heart race a little faster. Suddenly, the phone rang. The sound cut through the silence like a knife. I hesitated before picking up the receiver, my hand trembling. "Hello?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. There was nothing on the other end, just an eerie static. "Blow?" I repeated, but the only response was the crackling silence. I hung up, feeling a cold sweat form on my forehead. Trying to shake off the fear, I decided to check the house. Maybe there was a logical explanation for all this weirdness. As I moved through the rooms, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The rain pounded against the windows, and the fog outside seemed to press against the glass, as if trying to seep inside. Just as I was about to head back to the living room, I caught a glimpse of something out of the corner of my eye, a shadow moving near the basement door. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The basement was always creepy. This was different. The shadow seemed to have form and intent. My instincts screamed at me to run. Curiosity and a morbid sense of duty kept me rooted in place. Slowly, I approached the basement door. The air grew colder with each step, my heart pounding in my chest like a drum. I reached out, my hand trembling as I grasped the doorknob. The door creaked open, and a wave of icy air hit me. The stairs descended into darkness, and for a moment I thought I saw something moving down there, something unnatural. My mind raced with possibilities. Could it be an intruder? An animal? Or something far worse? I took a deep breath and steeled myself. Whatever it was, I had to know. The house, my sanctuary, had become a place of terror, and there was no turning back now. With the basement door now ajar, the darkness seemed to beckon me, its icy grip tightening around my spine. The rain outside pounded relentlessly, each drop echoing the growing sense of dread within me. Thunder rumbled ominously, shaking the house to its very foundation. As I stood at the top of the basement stairs, I could feel the weight of the silence pressing down, broken only by the occasional flicker of the lights above. I took a tentative step forward, the wooden stairs creaking under my weight. Each creak seemed to resonate with the beating of my heart, faster and louder with every step I took. The air grew colder, and the shadows seemed to dance just beyond the reach of the flickering light. Thick, musty smell filled my nostrils, a scent that seemed to whisper of decay and forgotten memories. Halfway down the stairs, I paused, straining my ears to catch any sound from below. For a moment, there was nothing but the pounding rain and my own ragged breathing. Then, faintly, I heard it, a soft, almost imperceptible whispering. It was a language I couldn't understand, but its tone was unmistakable. It was a call, a beckoning from the darkness. I reached the bottom of the stairs, my feet meeting the cold, concrete floor of the basement. The flickering light from above barely penetrated the inky blackness, casting long, eerie shadows that seemed to move on their own. I fumbled for the light switch, my fingers brushing against the cool, damp wall. When I finally found it and flicked it on, the bare bulb overhead sputtered to life, casting a dim, yellowish glow over the room. What I saw made my blood run cold. In the far corner of the basement, something was moving. At first, it was just a shadow, but as my eyes adjusted, I realized it was something more. A figure, hunched and grotesque, emerged from the darkness. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent light, and its skin was a sickly, pallid gray. It looked up at me, its mouth curling into a twisted grin. I took a step back, my heart hammering in my chest. The creature took a step forward, its movements slow and deliberate. It seemed to savor my fear, feeding off the terror that coursed through my veins. I wanted to scream, to run, but my legs felt like lead, rooted to the spot. Suddenly, the lights began to flicker again, plunging the basement into a strobe-like nightmare. The creature moved closer, its grotesque features illuminated in brief, horrifying flashes. It reached out a clawed hand, and I could feel the cold radiating from its touch even before it made contact. Panic surged through me, breaking the paralysis that had gripped my body. I turned and bolted up the stairs, my heart pounding in my ears. Behind me, I could hear the creature's guttural growls, its footsteps echoing in the confined space. I reached the top of the stairs and slammed the door shut, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. The door rattled as the creature pounded against it, each thud sending shockwaves of fear through me. I backed away, my mind racing. I had to get out of the house. I had to find help. But as I turned to make my escape, I realized with growing horror that the nightmare was far from over. The lights in the house flickered and died, plunging me into darkness once more. And in the silence that followed, I heard the whispering again, closer this time, and all around me. The rain continued to pour outside, the storm growing more violent with each passing moment. The fog pressed against the windows, and the shadows in the house seemed to come alive, twisting and writhing in the dim light. I was trapped, alone in the dark with something unspeakable, and there was no one coming to save me. My heart pounded in my chest as I leaned against the basement door, trying to catch my breath. The pounding from the other side had stopped, replaced by an unnerving silence. I strained to listen, hoping that the creature had given up. Deep down, I knew better. The house felt alive with a sinister energy, the shadows seeming to pulse and writhe in the corners of my vision. Took a step forward, my legs trembling. The rain outside lashed against the windows, and the wind howled like a wounded animal. I needed to get out, find help. As I moved through the hallway, the lights flickered back on, casting long, eerie shadows that seemed to reach out for me. The air was thick with tension, and every creak and groan of the house set my nerves on edge. Suddenly I saw it again, a shadow moving at the far end of the hallway. It was just a glimpse, fleeting darkness that disappeared as quickly as it appeared. My heart skipped a beat. Was it the same creature from the basement, or was something else lurking in the shadows? I couldn't tell. The fear was palpable, cold knot in my stomach. I moved cautiously, my footsteps barely making a sound on the wooden floor. As I passed the living room, I noticed the television had turned on by itself, the screen flickering with static. I approached it slowly, my reflection distorted in the black and white noise. Suddenly, a face appeared on the screen, pale and distorted, with hollow eyes that seemed to stare right through me. I jumped back, a scream caught in my throat, but the face vanished as quickly as it had appeared. The phone rang again, the shrill sound cutting through the silence. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the receiver. With a deep breath, picked it up. "Hello?" I whispered, my voice shaky. There was a moment of silence, then the same eerie static. But this time, there was something else. A faint whisper, almost inaudible, saying my name. "Get out," hissed, the voice low and menacing. I dropped the phone, my hands shaking uncontrollably. The walls seemed to close in around me, the air thick with a sense of impending doom. I turned towards the front door, my only escape, but the sight that greeted me made my blood run cold. The door was wide open, swinging gently in the wind, and standing in the doorway was the same grotesque figure I had seen in the basement. It was taller now, its limbs elongated and its eyes glowing with a sickly yellow light. It grinned at me, its mouth full of sharp, jagged teeth. I took a step back, my mind racing. There was no way out. The creature took a step forward, movements slow and deliberate, savoring my fear. In a blind panic, I turned and ran up the stairs, my legs barely able to carry me. I could hear the creature's footsteps behind me, each one sending a jolt of terror through my body. I reached my bedroom and slammed the door shut, pushing my dresser against it for good measure. My heart pounded in my ears, and I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins. The room was dark, the only light coming from the flickering street lamp outside. I backed away from the door, my eyes darting around the room for any sign of the creature. The pounding on the door started again, each thud louder and more insistent than the last. The dresser shook, and I knew it wouldn't hold for long. Desperation set in as I looked around for another way out. My eyes landed on the window, and I rushed over, fumbling with the lock. Wind howled as I pushed the window open, the rain lashing against my face. I climbed out onto the ledge, the ground far below. It was a long drop. I had no choice. I took a deep breath and jumped, the world spinning around me as I fell. I hit the ground hard, pain shooting through my body. I struggled to my feet, my legs trembling. Creature was still inside, but I knew it wouldn't be long before it found me. I stumbled down the street, the fog swallowing me up as I ran. The rain continued to pour, storm growing more violent with each passing moment. As I ran, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The shadows seemed to move with me, whispering my name in the wind. I knew I couldn't stop, couldn't look back. The nightmare was far from over, and the real horror was only just beginning. I ran blindly through the fog-drenched streets, my heart pounding and my breath ragged. The cold rain lashed against my face, mixing with the tears that I could no longer hold back. The shadows seemed to follow me, closing in, whispering my name with each gust of wind. I felt trapped in a nightmare with no way out. I stumbled and fell to my knees, the wet pavement scraping against my skin. I had no idea where I was going, just that I needed to get away from that house, from whatever unspeakable horror had emerged from the basement. As I struggled to my feet, a strange light caught my eye. It was coming from the end of the street, flickering like a dying flame. I felt an inexplicable pull toward it, like a moth to a flame. I approached cautiously, my heart still hammering in my chest. The light was coming from an old, dilapidated house that looked even more foreboding than my own. The windows were boarded up, and the front door hung ajar, swaying in the wind. Despite every instinct screaming at me to turn back, I stepped inside. The air inside the house was thick and musty, filled with the scent of decay. Flickering light came from a single candle on a table in the middle of the room, casting long, eerie shadows on the walls. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized I wasn't alone. In the corner of the room stood the creature, its grotesque form illuminated by the candlelight. It was even more terrifying up close, its skin a sickly gray, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light, grinned at me, its sharp teeth glinting in the dim light. My legs felt like they were made of lead, but I forced myself to move, to back away slowly. "Why are you doing this?" I managed to whisper, my voice trembling. The creature's grin widened, and it took a step forward. "You don't belong here," hissed, its voice like nails on a chalkboard. "This place is ours." My mind raced, trying to make sense of its words. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart. Creature tilted its head, as if considering the question. "To make you understand," replied, "to make you see." Before I could react, the creature lunged at me, claws outstretched. I screamed and turned to run, but the front door slammed shut, trapping me inside. I could feel the creature's cold breath on my neck as it closed in, its whispers growing louder, more insistent. I ran through the house, desperately searching for an escape. The walls seemed to close in around me, the shadows growing darker and more oppressive. I could hear the creature's footsteps behind me, slow and deliberate, savoring my fear. I stumbled into a room at the back of the house, slamming the door shut behind me. The room was empty, save for a large, cracked mirror on the far wall. I could see my reflection, pale and terrified, but something else was there too. In the mirror, the creature stood behind me, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. I spun around, but the room was empty. My mind was playing tricks on me, terror driving me to the brink of madness. I backed away from the mirror, my eyes never leaving the reflection. The creature moved closer, its grin widening. I felt a cold hand on my shoulder and screamed, turning to face my tormentor. But there was nothing there, just the empty room and the flickering candlelight. The whispers grew louder, filling my head with their insidious words. "You will never escape," it hissed. "This is your home now." I covered my ears, trying to block out the voices, but they only grew louder, more persistent. I could feel my sanity slipping away, the darkness closing in. I had to get out, had to escape this living nightmare. I rushed to the window, struggling to open it. The old, rusted frame refused to budge, and I pounded on the glass in desperation. The creature's reflection appeared in the window, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. I screamed and lashed out, shattering the glass. The cold night air rushed in, bringing with it a brief moment of clarity. I climbed through the broken window, cutting my hands on the jagged shards. I didn't care about the pain. I just needed to get away. As I stumbled into the street, I glanced back at the house. The light inside flickered and died, plunging the house into darkness. The whispers faded, replaced by the sound of my own ragged breathing. I was free, but I knew I would never truly escape the horror of that night. I ran through the fog, my mind racing. The nightmare was far from over, and I knew the creature was still out there, waiting, watching. And as I fled, I could still hear its whispers, a haunting reminder of the terror that would follow me for the rest of my life. Fog seemed to thicken as I ran, cold night air biting at my skin. My heart pounded in my chest, and my breath came in ragged gasps. Every shadow, every whisper of wind seemed to carry the creature's presence. I could still feel its cold, malevolent eyes on me, as if it were just a step behind, relishing in my terror. I stumbled through the deserts, my mind racing. I needed to find help, to find someone, anyone who could save me from this nightmare. But the town seemed empty, abandoned. The only sounds were the rain and my own frantic footsteps. The streetlights flickered overhead, casting eerie, shifting shadows that played tricks on my eyes. I turned a corner and saw a small convenience store at the end of the block, its neon sign flickering weakly. Hope surged through me, and I sprinted towards it, my legs burning with the effort. I burst through the door, the bell above it jingling loudly. The fluorescent lights inside were harsh and unsteady, casting a sickly glow over the aisles. "Help, please, someone help me," I shouted, my voice echoing in the empty store. There was no response. The place was deserted, shelves lined with dusty, untouched products. I ran to the counter, frantically searching for a phone. There was one, but it was an old rotary model, and my shaking hands struggled to dial. Just as I managed to dial the first few numbers, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the store into darkness. Panic gripped me as I fumbled with the phone, the static of the line growing louder in my ear. Then, from the back of the store, I heard it. A low, guttural growl. I turned, my eyes straining to see in the darkness. The creature was there, its eyes glowing with that sickly yellow light. It moved slowly, deliberately, savoring the fear that radiated from me. I dropped the phone and backed away, my mind screaming at me to run, but my body frozen in place. The creature reached out a clawed hand, its fingers curling around the edge of the counter. "You can't escape," it hissed, its voice like nails on a chalkboard. "This is your home now." With a surge of adrenaline, I broke free of my paralysis and ran towards the back of the store. I crashed through a door marked "Employees Only," finding myself in a narrow hallway lined with storage boxes. The creature's footsteps echoed behind me, slow and relentless. I reached the end of the hallway and found a fire exit. I slammed against the bar, bursting out into the alley behind the store. The rain poured down harder than ever, the wind howling through the narrow space. I slipped and fell, the ground slick with rain and filth. As I struggled to my feet, I saw the creature emerge from the doorway, its eyes glowing brighter in the darkness. I ran, my mind a blur of terror and desperation. I could feel the creature closing in, its presence a constant weight on my back. I darted through the maze of alleys, turning corners blindly, hoping to lose it in the labyrinthine streets. But no matter how fast I ran, it was always there, a step behind, its whispers filling my mind. Finally, I burst out onto a main street, the bright lights of a diner catching my eye. I sprinted towards it, hope flaring in my chest once more. I crashed through the door, the warmth and light of the diner a stark contrast to the cold, wet darkness outside. Few patrons inside looked up, startled by my sudden entrance. "Help, please, you have to help me," I cried, my voice raw with desperation. A kind-looking waitress hurried over, concern etched on her face. "What happened? Are you okay?" she asked, her voice soothing. There's something after me." Gasp, my breath coming in short, panicked bursts. "You have to help me, please." She glanced outside, her expression turning to confusion. "I don't see anything, honey." Are you sure? I turned to look, and for a moment, the street outside was empty. The fog had lifted slightly, and the rain had lessened to a drizzle. But I knew better. Creature was out there, hiding, waiting for its moment to strike. Please, you have to believe me, I insisted, my voice trembling. It's real. It's coming for me. The waitress exchanged a worried look with one of the patrons, an elderly man who had been watching quietly from his booth. He stood up, his face serious. We need to call the police, he said, his voice firm. The waitress nodded and hurried to the phone behind the counter. As she dialed, I took a seat, my body shaking with exhaustion and fear. The other patrons watched me with wary eyes, whispering amongst themselves. I tried to calm my racing heart, but the memory of the creature's eyes, its whispers, wouldn't leave my mind. The police arrived quickly, 2 officers entering the diner with a sense of urgency. They questioned me, their expressions skeptical but concerned. I told them everything, from the basement to the chase through the streets. They listened, but I could see the doubt in their eyes. All right, we'll take a look, one of the officers said, trying to reassure me. You stay here and rest. As they left, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that clung to me. I knew the creature was still out there, waiting for its chance. And as I sat in the brightly lit diner, surrounded by people, I realized that I was far from safe. The nightmare was far from over, and the real horror had only just begun. The warm light of the diner did little to calm my nerves. Even with the police now involved, I felt a gnawing dread deep within me. The creature's presence was like a shadow in my mind, constant reminder of the nightmare I couldn't escape. The other patrons tried to reassure me, but their words felt hollow. I watched as the officers left, their car's lights flashing red and blue in the foggy night. The waitress brought me a cup of coffee, her hands trembling slightly as she set it down in front of me. It's going to be okay, she said softly, but her eyes betrayed her uncertainty. I nodded, wrapping my hands around the warm cup. The steam rose in wisps, mingling with the residual chill that clung to me. I tried to take a sip, but my hands were shaking too much. The old man who had suggested calling the police approached me, his expression kind but serious. You look like you've seen a ghost, he said, sitting down across from me. Want to talk about it? I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. It's more than a ghost, I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. It's something evil. I don't know how to explain it. Like it's from another world. He nodded slowly, as if he had heard such things before. There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy, he quoted softly, his eyes distant. What you've seen, it's not something that can be easily understood, but you're not alone. Before I could respond, the bell above the diner door jingled again, and the police officers returned. Their faces were grim, and I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. We checked the area, one of them said, his tone cautious. We didn't find anything unusual. I shook my head, frustration bubbling up inside me. You don't understand. It's not something you can just find. It's out there, hiding, waiting. The officers exchanged glances. We'll keep an eye out, the second officer said. But for now, you should get some rest. We'll take you home and make sure you're safe. Own. The word felt like a cruel joke. How could I go back to the place where the nightmare began? But I didn't argue. I was too exhausted, too defeated to fight. The waitress handed me my coat, and I followed the officers out into the night. The drive back to my house was a blur. Fog had thickened again, and the rain had picked up, drumming against the car roof like a heartbeat. The police car's lights cut through the darkness, casting eerie shadows on the road. I stared out the window, half expecting to see the creature lurking in the mist. When we arrived, the officers walked me to my door, their presence a small comfort. We'll do a quick sweep of the house, one of them said, just to be sure. I nodded, unlocking the door with trembling hands. The house felt different now, tainted by the horrors of the night. The officers moved through each room, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. I stood in the living room, my eyes darting to every shadow, every corner, waiting for something to move. After what felt like an eternity, the officers returned. Everything looks clear, one of them said, but we'll have a patrol car in the area, just in case. Thank you, I whispered, my voice hollow. They left and I was alone again. The house was eerily quiet, Kind of silence that presses down on you, making you hyper-aware of every creak, every rustle. I locked the doors, checking each one twice, then moved to the windows, making sure they were secure. My body was exhausted, but my mind was racing, every nerve on edge. I made my way upstairs, the steps creaking beneath my weight. I hesitated outside my bedroom door, the memory of the creature's pursuit fresh in my mind. I pushed the door open slowly, peering inside. The room was empty, just as the officers had said, but it still felt wrong, like the air itself was charged with a sinister energy. Closed the door behind me and leaned against it, sliding down to sit on the floor. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving me drained and numb. I forced myself to stand and changed into dry clothes, my movements mechanical. I crawled into bed, pulling the covers up to my chin. The rain continued to beat against the windows, a relentless reminder of the storm outside. I tried to close my eyes, but every time I did, I saw the creature's glowing eyes, its twisted grin. The hours dragged on, the darkness seeming to stretch endlessly. Sleep was a distant hope, chased away by the lingering terror. And then, just as I was beginning to drift off, I heard it. Faint whisper, coming from somewhere in the house. I bolted upright, my heart leaping into my throat. The whispering grew louder, chorus of malevolent voices filling the air. I stumbled out of bed, my legs weak, and crept to the door. The hallway was dark. The whispering was unmistakable, growing closer, more insistent. I backed away, my mind screaming in fear. The whispers were all around me now, echoing off the walls, filling my head with their insidious words. "You will never escape," they hissed. "This is your home now." I clamped my hands over my ears, trying to shut out the voices, but they only grew louder. I could feel the darkness closing in, cold, malevolent presence of the creature suffocating me. And as the whispers reached a fever pitch, I realized the horrifying truth. I would never be free. The nightmare was my reality. There was no escape. The whispers crescendoed into a deafening roar, enveloping me in a maelstrom of terror. I stumbled back, my body trembling as the voices filled every corner of my mind. It felt like the walls were closing in, the air growing colder and more oppressive with each passing second. I knew I couldn't stay in my bedroom. Creature's presence was stronger here, feeding on my fear. I bolted out of the room, slamming the door behind me, and raced down the stairs. The house seemed to pulse with a dark energy, every shadow hiding unspeakable horrors. I could still hear the whispers, now mingled with faint mocking laughter. My heart pounded in my chest as I reached the living room, my eyes scanning for any sign of the creature. The room was empty, but the oppressive atmosphere remained. I backed into the corner, my mind racing. The front door was just a few feet away, but I knew it wouldn't be that easy. The creature was playing with me, toying with my desperation. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I needed a plan, a way to escape this nightmare for good. Just as I was about to make a run for the door, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the house into darkness. Panic surged through me, and I fumbled for my phone, using the weak flashlight to cut through the inky blackness. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, and I could feel the creature drawing closer. Suddenly, I heard a thud from the basement. My heart skipped a beat as I turned to face the door that led downstairs. The thought of going down there, into the heart of darkness, was almost too much to bear. But I knew that if I wanted any chance of escaping, I had to confront whatever was lurking below. I approached the basement door, my hands shaking as I reached for the handle. The door creaked open, revealing a staircase that descended into pitch blackness. I took a deep breath and stepped onto the first step, the air growing colder with each step I took. The whispers seemed to come from all around me, echoing off the walls. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, the weak light from my phone barely illuminated the room. I could see old, dusty furniture and boxes piled haphazardly. The basement felt like a different world, a place where the normal rules didn't apply. I moved cautiously, my footsteps echoing in the silence. Suddenly, my phone flickered and went out, leaving me in complete darkness. Panic surged through me, and I fumbled with the phone trying to get the light back on. That's when I heard it, the soft, deliberate footsteps of the creature. It was here, in the basement with me. I backed away, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The footsteps grew louder, closer. I could feel the creature's presence, cold, malevolent force that seemed to sap the strength from my body. I stumbled over something on the floor and fell, my hands scraping against the rough concrete. Desperation took over, and I crawled away, my heart pounding in my ears. Creature's breath was hot on my neck, its whispers filling my mind. "You cannot escape," hissed. "This is your home now." I felt a cold, clammy hand wrap around my ankle, and I screamed, kicking out in blind panic. My foot connected with something solid, and the grip loosened. I scrambled to my feet, my hands groping in the darkness for anything I could use as a weapon. My fingers closed around a rusted old pipe, and I swung it wildly, the metal whistling through the air. I felt it connect with something, heard a guttural snarl of pain. Creature recoiled, and I took the opportunity to run, my legs burning with effort. I raced up the stairs, not daring to look back, and burst into the living room. The front door was just ahead, and I sprinted towards it, my breath coming in frantic gasps. I could hear the creature behind me, its footsteps pounding on the floor. I reached the door, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the lock. The door swung open, and I stumbled out into the night. The rain had stopped, and the fog was lifting. First light of dawn breaking through the clouds. I ran down the street, not caring where I was going, just needing to get away. Creature's whispers faded into the distance, but I knew it was still out there, waiting. I didn't stop running until I reached the edge of town, collapsed onto the ground, my body trembling with exhaustion and fear. As the first rays of sunlight touched my skin, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I had escaped, but deep down, I knew the truth. The creature was still out there, and it would never stop hunting me. The nightmare was far from over. The real horror had only just begun. The first light of dawn offered little comfort as I lay on the cold, wet ground at the edge of town. My body was exhausted, but my mind raced with the horror of the night. I knew the creature was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for its chance to strike again. I couldn't keep running forever. I had to end this. Summoning the last reserves of my strength, I stood up and looked back toward the town. The streets were eerily silent, the fog lifting to reveal the familiar, yet now sinister outlines of houses and shops. I took a deep breath, the cold air burning in my lungs. I couldn't let this thing control my life any longer. It was time to face my fear. I walked back through the empty streets, each step heavy with dread. The memories of the creature's whispers and its cold, malevolent presence haunted me, but I forced myself to keep moving. As I approached my house, the sun was rising, casting long shadows across the yard. The house looked just as it had the night before, but now it felt like a prison, a place of unspeakable terror. I steeled myself and stepped inside. The silence was deafening, the air thick with an unnatural stillness. I made my way through the house, my heart pounding in my chest. The living room, the kitchen, the hallway, each room was empty, but I could feel the creature's presence lurking, just out of sight. I reached the basement door and hesitated. This was where it all began, where the nightmare had first emerged. I had to go back down there, confront the source of my fear. With a trembling hand, I opened the door and descended the stairs, the darkness below swallowing me whole. The basement was just as I had left it, the old furniture and boxes casting long, ominous shadows. I gripped the rusted pipe tighter, my only defense against the creature. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to call out into the darkness. "Show yourself," I demanded, my voice echoing off the walls. "I'm not running anymore." For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then the whispers began, low and insidious, filling the air with their malevolent intent. The temperature dropped, and I could feel the creature's presence growing stronger, palpable force that seemed to wrap around me like a shroud. The creature stepped out of the shadows, its glowing eyes fixated on me. It grinned, its sharp teeth glinting in the dim light. "You cannot escape," it hissed, voice a chorus of sinister whispers. "This is your home now." I tightened my grip on the pipe, my fear giving way to a surge of determination. "No," I said, my voice steady. "This ends now." The creature lunged at me, its claws outstretched. I swung the pipe with all my strength, the metal connecting with a sickening thud. The creature snarled in pain, but it didn't stop. It was relentless, driven by a dark, malevolent force. I swung again and again, each blow met with a hiss of fury. The whispers grew louder, more frantic, as if the creature was losing its grip on reality. I could feel its power waning, its presence weakening with each strike. Desperation took over, and I fought with everything I had, channeling all my fear and anger into each blow. Finally, with one last desperate swing, creature let out a guttural scream and collapsed to the floor. The whispers fell silent, the oppressive atmosphere lifting. The creature's body began to dissolve, turning into a dark, oily mist that dissipated into the air. I stood there, breathing heavily, the pipe slipping from my grasp. It was over. The nightmare was finally over. I stumbled back up the stairs, the morning light streaming through the windows, casting a warm glow over the house. Terror of the night had passed, but its scars would remain. As I stepped outside, the sun was fully risen, the town waking up to a new day. I felt a sense of relief, but also a lingering unease. The creature was gone, but the memory of its whispers, its malevolent eyes, would haunt me forever. I knew I had survived something unimaginable, something that would change me forever. The real horror, I realized, wasn't the creature itself, but the darkness it brought out within me. Fear, the desperation, fight for survival, these were the true terrors that would stay with me. I had faced my worst nightmare and come out the other side, but the battle had left its mark. As I walked away from the house, I knew that I would never be the same. The whispers might be gone, but their echo would linger in my mind, haunting reminder of the night I faced the darkness and survived. The nightmare was over, but the horror of that night would stay with me, a shadow in the back of my mind, forever. If you liked this real and horrifying story, leave your like and subscribe to the channel. Check out this other real horror story appearing in the video. Thanks for watching.